All right, good evening, welcome. Let's get started. So cute. Welcome, my name is Dr. Doug Kelly. It's good to have everyone here in the live audience, and it's also nice to have the broadcast audience with us tonight. We appreciate your time, everybody's time. This, of course, is the Spirit of Life weekly service from the International Church of Metaphysical Humanism. And we had our first meeting, of course, last week, inaugural meeting, and gave some information about what we do. And there'll be more information tonight as well about what we do. What we want to do first is to start with the reading of our 9 principles of belief. And just an FYI, as we go through the weeks, you know, this is something that anybody can volunteer to read. If you are ever interested, just tell me and we'll get you up here and slap a mic on you and you can do it. All right? So let's read the 9 principles of belief. Just a little information. The spiritual philosophy of metaphysical humanism is based on 9 metaphysical principles that empower and enhance the human condition. These solid principles are excellent as the foundation of an individual's core values, but sufficiently broad enough to complement most spiritual beliefs. All the Church's articles, classes, courses, and writings have some basis in these principles. And these principles are, number 1, as sentient and evolving human beings, we not only believe in practicing and living by the principle do no harm, but also in the principle of do right, thus enhancing the vibrational level of humanity. Number 2, we believe in the indomitable power of the human spirit to ultimately triumph in the face of any dilemma. The answers we seek already exist within us. We invoke and exert the counselor and guru within. Number 3, we believe that we alone are responsible for and capable of solving human social problems, and believe the roots of these solutions lie in exploring, understanding, and empowering the human condition. Number 4, we embrace the differences that make all human beings unique, recognizing that we all come from star material and are therefore equal, irrespective of heritage, beliefs, gender, or gender preference. One planet, one race, one ancestry, one destiny. Number 5, rather than a supreme being, we recognize and honor the divine energy that exists in all living things. Number 6, we believe the nature of a human being encompasses both a physical and a spiritual aspect, and that human consciousness survives the death of the physical body in a coherent fashion. Thus, death opens a new chapter of life and conducts the individual into a higher state of existence. Number 7, we believe in self-acceptance, self-responsibility, and respect for free will, and that these 3 synergistically create the goal of self-completeness. Number 8, we believe in the value of practical education in metaphysics, metapsychology, and life skills as a means of empowering the human spirit and enhancing the human condition. We maintain an open but grounded mind to potential realities as yet undescribed by science. And number 9, we believe that discovering the true nature of consciousness and human existentialism will ultimately have a positive impact on human evolution and peaceful coexistence. And for the benefit of our broadcast audience, more information on these can be found at metaphysicalhumanism.org. A brief overview of tonight's program. In just a moment, I'm going to talk more about the Life Leadership Paragon. We mentioned it last week. I'm going to explain it briefly, but then I'm going to get into the first part of it, which is self-acceptance. So we'll be doing that. Dr. Vicki Hunter will be here via Skype from Canada. Her topic tonight is the difference between ESP and intuition. And then for those 2 are part of our Empowering the Spirit segment. And then for the next segment, which is Exploring the Unknown, Grant Rubendunst will be presenting the psychology of hauntings, which is an interesting presentation. Then we'll have some announcements, and we'll finish it up with our Soul Light guided meditation, and then we'll have the final gong. I know you're waiting for that, right? Best part. It fess up, huh? And then we'll do our coffee clatch social hour. Funky word. All right. Last week we talked a little bit about what metaphysical humanism is. We are metaphysical humanists, that's what we're called. I talked about how the church is structured, talked about some FAQs, frequently asked questions on some various things. One of the things I didn't really get into much, and due to a lack of time, is some of the different programs that we have. So I'm going to briefly mention that, then get into the Life Leadership Paragon. We have a number of programs that are sponsored by the church. Obviously, this weekly church service, both in the physical location and on the live broadcast, is one of our programs, educational programs, because that's what our charter is, education, mostly. We have done, for the last 3 years, Dr. Hunter and myself have hosted a weekly radio broadcast online, and we discontinued that a couple of months ago in lieu of this new format. So we've done that. Another one of our programs is the Institute of Metaphysical Humanistic Science, or IMHS. That's our premier university. That's where we offer bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in metaphysics, metaphysical humanism, with a number of specializations such as spiritual counseling, life coaching, hypnosis, holistic healing, Reiki, paranormal science, parapsychology, cryptozoology, hominology, things like that. And there's more information on that for the benefit of our broadcast audience at metaphysicsinstitute.org. So that's our main school. Another aspect that we offer for the main school for IMHS is hardship scholarships for people who have a genuine financial need but feel that an education like this could help them to help others. So that's available on the website too. We also have another school, the International College of Humanistic Science, or ICHS. That school is primarily focused on standalone courses in metaphysics and related topics. We also just started offering a degree program there as well that takes a slightly different approach. IMHS it teaches spiritual development along with knowledge and training. ICHS basically offers degrees that focus on knowledge and training, but not so much on the spiritual development. It's for people who are not interested in that part. We only offer a handful of specializations at ICHS, but it's one of our schools. And the URL, the domain is ichsworld.org for that school. There are no hardship programs there. A fifth program that we offer is empoweredrecovery.com. Now, I've had that website and that program since 2001, started working on it. Empowered Recovery is for the friends and family of alcoholics or those in addictive relationships or addicts. And it was born from experience. Much of what metaphysical humanism teaches today started there, and it's about self-improvement. But it's primarily for the friends and families of addicts or alcoholics. That's empoweredrecovery.com. We also have Paranexus, Association of Anomalous Researchers. That since 2008. That is for basically an association of serious researchers. That's part of our mission as well, is to explore the unknown, to research that, and we have members there. Dr. Brian Parsons is the executive director of Paranexus. That's paranexus.org if your broadcast audience wants to visit that. And then we have the International Metaphysical Practitioners Association, or IMPA, which is simply an accrediting association for metaphysics schools, for metaphysical practitioners. It's designed to give another aspect of credibility. There's an ethics course that members have to take, a lifetime membership once you join, and so that's there. So that's just a little bit on our programs. Any questions? Any answers? I'm looking for answers too, you know. All right, let's talk about the Life Leadership Paragon. As you recall from last week, and it's on the poster here, the Life Leadership Paragon consists of 4 traits. 3 traits that work synergistically to create the 4th. The 3 traits are self-acceptance, self-responsibility, and respect for free will. And they synergistically create self-completeness. Now, I'm sure you're all aware of what synergy is. It simply means that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. 1 + 1 = 3. No, it's not the new math. It's synergy, right? So when you combine self-acceptance, self-responsibility, respect for free will, and they become balanced, the result is being complete within yourself, standing on your own 2 feet, not needing other people to complete you or anything else outside of yourself. And that's what we teach, that you have everything within you that you need to be successful. And that's self-completeness. Some call it self-actualization. We call it self-completeness. So let's talk about the first one, self-acceptance. As we talk about this over the next few weeks, these different aspects of the Life Leadership Paragon, I'm hoping to be able to convey how elegant this model is. It may seem, oh, okay, that's cool, but when you really come into an understanding of how it works, it becomes really a powerful tool for personal growth. It really does, more than you'd even think in the beginning. And the idea is to balance these 3 areas to thus, create self-completeness. So self-acceptance is the first one. Obviously, it's self-explanatory, right? Accept yourself just as you are, right here, right now, warts and all, as Shakespeare said. Do you think that the world could use a self-esteem boost? We all could probably, some more than others, right? But if we could just somehow raise the self-esteem of the world, what do you think would happen? We'd have fewer wars, fewer fights, fewer bad relationships, right? And that's what self-acceptance is all about, self-esteem. Self-esteem is obviously you esteem yourself, you hold yourself in high regard. Is it the same as narcissism? No. No, it just means having a healthy self-concept. Self-esteem means internal validation and expectations. So I have my own expectations and I validate myself. That's self-esteem. What if I told you, we talk about low self-esteem, right? What if I told you there's no such thing as low self-esteem? If you think about people with low self-esteem, what it really translates to is external expectations and validation. So we call it them-esteem. I esteem them more than I do me. Self-esteem is I have a good, healthy self-concept. If I have them-esteem, I'm probably codependent and I'm not in a healthy place because I only feel good about me when I'm doing what my parents say, my religious leaders say, my boss says, my partner says. When I'm doing what they think I should be doing, then I feel good about me. See, external expectations and validation. And so the whole point of self-acceptance is to bring that back into its proper order. Adversity is nothing more or less than a state of disorder. Just let that slowly simmer for a moment. Think about it. You've ever been in adversity? I know we all have. Think about it. How did we get out of that adversity? Did we not fix the problem, solve the problem one way or another? So when we brought order back to it, when we put things back in their proper order, the adversity went away. So adversity is really nothing more or less than a state of disorder. So if you find yourself in adversity right here and right now, at this time in your life, put it back into its proper order. What has to change for this adversity to leave? You may have heard of the book As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, written well over 100 years ago. Short little book, available in most bookstores, free online if you do a search, the As a Man Thinketh. In that book, it's a profound book, he says that when we learn the spiritual lesson contained in any circumstance, it passes. Is there a difference between knowing a lesson and learning a lesson? There is. Think about it. How many times have we said, I really shouldn't do that, but we do anyway. Or I should do that, but we don't. We know the lesson, but we haven't really learned it, have we? No. But when we learn something, we change. And that is taking your power back. I talked about that last week. The panacea for about everything that ails you is to take your power back, reclaim your power. It's one of our sacred obligations, number 2, in fact, reclaim your power. So when we learn the lesson, we change. And when we change our energy signature, people call it a vibe, you know, that vibe that we put off, or put out, I should say. It's an energy signature. It can be healthy or unhealthy. Well, when we change, when we grow, when we learn, when we have those aha moments and those epiphanies, our energy signature changes. And we then begin to attract more good stuff, because you know, like attracts like. And so if we have a healthy energy signature, we attract other people with healthy energy signatures. And and occasionally the person with an unhealthy energy signature comes along too, right? But because we respect ourselves, because we have a good self-acceptance, because we have self-esteem and not them-esteem, we don't really click with them anymore. Why? Because our energy signatures are not harmonically compatible. They don't harmonize. You know, you ever met somebody and you just get this weird vibe from them and you just don't really want anything to do with them? It's because your energy signatures don't harmonize. They don't mesh. You know, there's no chemistry, if you will. All right, so that is looking at ourselves properly. So how do we get to this self-esteem? How do we build a healthier self-concept? How do we accept ourselves? Well, one way is to view mistakes properly. Let's talk about it from this angle. Another way is to have a proper view of perfection. Anybody here perfect? Can I see your hands, please? All right. My son raises his hand because he knows where I'm going with this. All right. Why aren't you perfect? Anybody? How come you're not perfect?
Because we're basing what other people think we should be.
Okay, and then the answer was because we base, say it again?
What we should be by what other people say.
What we should be by what other people say. Okay. Why else are you not perfect? You said you weren't perfect, so how come you're not perfect? Anybody?
Still a work in progress.
Well, that's good. Work in progress, he says. Anybody else? Why aren't you perfect?
What is perfect?
Well, we're going to get to that. Good. She says, what is perfect? We're getting to that. When I ask this question in seminars, I usually hear, first of all, I hear, well, nobody's perfect. And I say, I am. How come you're not? And I'll tell you, I get this long silence. Isn't it interesting? We have been so conditioned to think we're not perfect for so many decades that we never really thought about it. Why aren't I perfect? And then finally somebody says, well, because I make mistakes, so I'm not perfect. Well, let's talk about mistakes. How do we learn in life? By making mistakes, right? It's so obvious. We blow it, we learn, we change, we grow, we don't do that again, because that's how we grow as human beings. You cannot remove the mistakes from the human being. That's just who we are and how we grow and learn. That's part of the deal. So we should have a proper view of mistakes. When you make a mistake, what do? Well, you recognize it, you make the necessary changes, make amends if necessary, for whoever it affected, if they'll accept it, and then move on. Guilt-free. I'm going to say something, I want you to never forget it. There is no value in guilt. Guilt is a pointless, wasted human emotion. Now, we can regret things that we've done, right? But only to the extent that we learn the lesson contained in it and then change and move on. There's no point in guilt. You know how many people carry around the guilt bags over their shoulder? And they drag that guilt bag, and whenever something happens, and they blame themselves because they have them-esteem, so they stuff that with more guilt, and they got this huge bag they're dragging around. And I'll bet you some of you here tonight, and even in the broadcast, have that bag, that guilt bag over your shoulder. And here's what I want you to do. Just open your hands and let it fall. Let it go. Release it. There is no value in guilt. How many here have done something you didn't want to do, or you're sorry you did? Anybody done that before? Of course we all have. That's part of the human experience. It's how we grow. It's how we raise awareness. We're not aware that we're doing something wrong. Most of the time we don't think, okay, now how can I go out and really screw up? How can I hurt somebody? People don't do that. Okay, yes, there's the psychopaths and the sociopaths out there that do that, but most people are not that way. They don't lie awake at night scheming how they can hurt other people. It's due to a lower awareness, lack of awareness. It's a lack of knowing. I just didn't know any better. And that's why we blow it. And then we think Gee, I really screwed that up, and man, do I feel bad about that. I hurt somebody's feelings or whatever it was I did. But most of us are not guilty of crimes against humanity, right? Say right. Good answer. Just ask me, I'll tell you what to say, and it'll always be a good answer. All right? So when we do something, we raise our awareness, we recognize it, and then we kick ourselves for not making today's decisions with tomorrow's experience level. That make any sense? Of course not. Back to perfection. So people say, I'm not perfect because I make mistakes. I make mistakes too, and I'm perfect. And then it comes down to this point. Let me tell you about perfect people. First of all, let me tell you what perfect is not. You know that fantasy of perfection that we all grew up with? Mistake-free, error-free? That is a fantasy. It is not real. It's an ancient belief system designed to manipulate and control through guilt and shame. Why? Because you're never quite good enough, are you? There's always a reason to feel bad about yourself. Interesting, when we're born, we start to grow up, we're programmed and conditioned to strive for what? Perfection. And yet, on the other hand, we know that there's something we can never attain. What is it? Perfection. Now, how much sense does that make? That makes no logical sense whatsoever. So here's a better definition of perfection. Is there but anybody on this planet better at being you than you are? No, of course not. We're a perfect representation of us, aren't we? Perfect people strive to be better tomorrow than they were yesterday. Perfect people are a perfect work in progress, Ed. Perfect people are perfectly themselves. They're getting better every day. Now, who here is perfect? Can I see your hands, please? Good answer. Good answer. You know, every now and then I ask that question. Anybody here perfect? Or I'll ask them, are you perfect? And they say, hell yes. What's wrong with you? Duh. Of course I am. Are they narcissistic? No. They just get it. We can't go through life kicking ourselves so bad all the time. There's always some reason to kick yourself. Well, I screwed that up. I did that. I shouldn't have done that. Blah, 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 blah. I ate too much. I didn't eat enough. Or I do this or do that. It doesn't matter. We don't want to get to the end of our days on our deathbed and look back and have a bad case of the woulda, coulda, shouldas, the if-onlys, and the might-have-beens, right? We don't want to look back and say, you know what? I really created a drama about that one thing. And you know what? Now in retrospect, it doesn't matter. It's pointless. It's irrelevant. So that's perfection. You are perfectly right here because of the choices you've made in life. So am I. Everything about us, we are perfect. Now, if this is not where you want to be, change it. It's not rocket science. If you don't like where you're at, learn the spiritual lesson contained and change it. All right. A couple of other points on self-acceptance. Don't take yourself too seriously. Now, that's something I have to work on a lot. I have students who take themselves way too seriously, and I've known a lot of people who take themselves way too seriously. And I know one person in particular who tends to take himself way too seriously, and I have to go have a talk with myself, slap myself around a little bit, not literally, but say, you know, don't take yourself so seriously. Why? Because it's not about you, and it's not about me, it's about us. Lighten up a little bit. Do your best, but lighten up on yourself and don't take yourself too seriously. Have realistic expectations of yourself. I have seen people and heard people over the years who said, well, I can't do that. I'm just not smart enough. I'm not educated enough. I'm not whatever enough. Stop it. That's, as Zig Ziglar would say, stinking thinking. You know, it's not real. Stop that kind of self-talk. Every one of us here and abroad are entitled to the same good things in life, no more, no less. Same good things as anyone else. Is that right? Am I right or am I right? It's another one of those right questions, right? Everybody's entitled to the good things in life, but we have to just get them. But we don't get them, obviously, at somebody else's expense. So how do you apply this information that we've talked about? Ponder what you've learned tonight, what I've talked about. Later on, you can go back and review this video broadcast in the archives on the Metaphysical Humanism website if you want, .org. Pay attention to your self-talk. If you catch yourself saying something negative or a negative impression, say out loud, cancel, cancel. And then say something positive about yourself. You know, think of it as the first thought bank of insert your name. When we say something negative or we have a negative thought or negative self-talk, it's like making withdrawals from that thought bank, that self-esteem bank. When we say something positive, it's like making deposits to it. So many people are so heavily overdrawn in their thought bank that it's not even funny. Start putting good things in it. Here's what you can do. Tonight when you go home, take out a piece of paper and clock yourself 1 minute. Write as many positive things as you can think of about yourself in that 1 minute. You know, nobody's going to see it but you. Say whatever you want, whatever's positive. See how many you can come up with. You know, some people will find, you know, can think of 2 or 3 or 4. I've had other people come up with like 15. They really like themselves. So, do that. And then each day for the next week, in the morning and in the evening, review it. And add one more thing to that list. Now I've got one last exercise that I'm going to share with you. I think it's really cool. And then we'll move on to our next speaker. It's really a cool thing. It's this energy spot I've discovered through my research, and it's on the top of the shoulder. It's always opposite of your dominant hand. So if you're wherever you're at, if you're here, would you please stand up? I'll show you how to do this. And you won't believe how much better you feel after you do this. It's incredible. If you're listening to the broadcast, do the same thing. Stand up. Your dominant hand, whichever one it is. I'm right-handed, so put out your dominant hand, whichever one it is. Now, this energy signature or center that we have on our shoulder needs pressure. So you just bend your elbow, put your hand on your shoulder. Now I want you to go up and down like this and apply pressure. What are you doing? You're patting yourself on the back. Do that more. You can sit down. But don't you feel better a little bit now? You're laughing. All right. Good deal. Next week, we're going to talk about self-responsibility, part 2 on the Life Leadership Paragon. And then the week after that, we'll get to respect for free will and wrap it all up. Okay, next on the program is Dr. Vicki Hunter. She's going to be talking about psychic phenomena. Oops, wrong one. Dr. Vicki is going to be talking about difference between ESP and intuition. Dr. Vicki Hunter has worked as a clairvoyant for 40 years and is an accomplished spiritual counselor and educator. She's a former TV host and author of several books and programs, including her flagship work, Principles for Natural Laws and Learning. She serves on the church's board of directors and is also vice president of operations. Since 2011, she's co-hosted the church's weekly broadcast, as I had mentioned earlier, and she hails from British Columbia. And so, welcome, Dr. Vicki.
Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. Nice to see you all. One of the biggest questions I had about myself as I was growing up and evolving is, what is that ESP that everybody talks about? And it took a lot of years, but I think I've kind of figured it out. ESP is that sixth sense. You know, we have our 5 senses, then that sixth sense is actually something that everybody has. Now, different from intuition, so we're going to put that aside for a second. Malcolm Gladwell put out a book a number of years ago called Blink. It's probably the most succinct kind of explanation for ESP that I've ever read, and it's just a beautiful piece, and I highly recommend it. But it's this front part of the brain, this actually called the prefrontal cortex, ventromedial prefrontal cortex. And it has this kind of a sonar radar that each of us has that sends out signals. Earlier, Dr. Kelly, I was listening, it was beautiful about these energy signatures that we send out. But we all have that, and that is ESP. Now, as I studied under Mr. Frank Appleyard, great hypnosis teacher back in the 70s, he coined that phrase auto-sensory perception. And he says we automatically have it. Everyone has that to varying degrees. We talk about some people are very aware, some people aren't so aware, and it's just that interrelational personal skill. So when you walk into a room and you get a really good vibe of that room, it's not really an intuition that you're having, it's an autosensory perception. So that would be the ESP. Mentalists, you've seen there's lots of them. These guys who are either they demonstrate hypnosis and little tricks, or they perform. There's all kind of little magical things that they do. They're really good mentalists. They have such a high perceptivity of other people. They can even read a bead of sweat, and I can't imagine how much pressure that would be for somebody. But they have this ability to detect what's going to happen next, and even heat signatures and so on. So mentalists are often confused in the psychic department, like what is a psychic? So, lots of people say, I challenge anybody, to prove that they're psychic, pick which ball is under the cup, so to speak, and how many do you get out of 10. And it's interesting because if we can see it that everyone has an autosensory perception, also known as ESP, then we can take that a step further to say, well, then what is intuition? What about those things that we can't know about? Well, generally speaking, they're emotionally based. It's emotionally driven, and it's just in the human condition. So if we're connecting with each other and we have these little senses of things that, okay, it's not an autosensory perception. I have no logical explanation to why I know something. Then that would be in the realm of the unknown, but it's nearly always instigated by some kind of emotional motivation. And as my mentor, Frank Appleyard, would say years ago, that you can't fabricate emotion. Meaning to say, you can't make it up. You feel it, or you don't feel it. You can pretend that you feel a certain way, but is it real? But when you have an intuition of something that's coming, or that's elsewhere, again, not with logic, it's usually a feeling that's inspired. So it's something else, and you can't replicate it, which is why it's very difficult to test people for psychic abilities, because you just can't replicate emotion. Emotion is in the moment, so to speak. So people who can, somebody's trapped under the car and they can lift a 2,000-pound car off of somebody. That's all that adrenaline and the emotion. Ask them to repeat it. And, well, they can't, because it was in that moment. Intuition is, again, people have varying degrees of intuition, and it's not only motivated by emotion, but it's also a different perceptivity that each of us has that's a little stronger than the other. Some people are clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, and what that means is higher sensitivities in an intuitive realm. So very often how I explain this to people is you go to an event, you walk into a room, and you get a vibe. Well, that could be explained with an ASP. But if you're at home and you haven't been to the event yet, and you have a feeling that something is going to happen, got no logical explanation for it, there's nothing that could stimulate any of your physical senses to it, but you have a sense that something exciting is going to happen, or something, usually it's bad because people unfortunately focus more on negative than they do positive, but it's that, I got a sense about something, that's an ESP. Or an intuition. So the difference is when you're there in the experience versus not in the experience and getting a sense, ESP to intuition. So that's really as simplified as I can put it. When we get feelings about other people, it's really difficult to translate what that would be. And I think most parents understand, you get a sense of your kids, no matter how far away they are, no matter, if they're on a trip, you get a feeling because you're psychically connected. And that would be of an intuitive nature. So again, you don't have the physical stimuli, but you have some other kind of sense, the intuition. So then how do you translate that? And what I mean to say by that is I can get a picture in my head of something that's going to happen. How do I tell the story? What is the story? And when I started doing, actually I was predicting things when I was really, really young, like getting into a lot of trouble actually at home because I was raised in a really religious family and they thought that, I must be possessed by the devil. But I had a great grandmother who was a teacup reader also. And so she, kind of runs in the family a little bit. And a lot of people say that it does. I think everyone just likes to maybe, as somebody wrote to us this week saying, coming out of the closet, not being afraid to tell other people. We want to be careful not to give unsolicited advice, though, because that's what I tended to do. When you're young, you're a teenager and so on, then it's a little bit tricky. But I would just know what was going to happen. I would get a feeling. Where I might be inaccurate is knowing how to translate that. So, when you're young, you see boy meets girl, oh, that's not going to go very well. Well, that just might mean that they might have a bad day. You see, it doesn't mean that they'll break up. It just means they might have a bad day. So it's learning how to translate those senses that we get, those intuitive sounds, smells, or pictures, and so on. So it took me, I was actually given tarot cards when I was 19 because I was a little weird, and a friend said, I think you'll like these. And I did. I took to them right away. It's whatever kind of focus I could use. And I've since learned many, many ways to use that because it's not just tarot cards. But a focus that could tell a story, some way to be able to channel that energy and for someone else. It always somehow triggered through emotions with people. So when I do a reading for somebody, I would plug in, so to speak, and then be able to tell a story by what I'm feeling. Most of the time it's not going to make sense to me because it's not my life. I get these little Kodak moments, I call them, or I might hear something or smell something because I tend to use all of my senses. But again, there's no explanation for it. There's no logical, scientific, repeatable explanation for being intuitive, and yet we all do it. Every human being has that intuitive sense, and that's where I think it's in that spiritual realm. We could metaphysically go to a quantum realm, if you like, that, things are all happening simultaneously, and we can get into a big explanation. But I think that if we just keep it really simple, that we are energies. Each of us is an energy before we come to the body. That energy is sustained throughout our lifetime, and of course we return to an energy. And it's in the first law of thermodynamics, actually. But if you're a spirit, come to a body, return to spirit form, the spirit always remains. So we have that connection to that some other space and time always. Everyone to varying degrees, everyone can learn better how to access and tap into your intuition, but it's really about knowing yourself. So I go right back to before about you can get these little feelings, but how do you translate them? The better you know yourself, the better the story that you can tell, because you can learn what's separate from you versus what's in you, and then always trying to look at that objectivity for other people. But emotionally, it's emotionally driven, but hopefully we can become more emotionally balanced so we can see those pictures. So to go back to the beginning, ESP and intuition are connected, but they're very different. They're very different things. ASP or ESP is very logically, humanly, physically explainable. And this is where I would like to see more of the so-called psychic or metaphysical community be able to make that distinction better. So again, I'm going to go back to when I finally read, again, many years ago, Blink, when it first came out by Malcolm Gladwell. I was elated that somebody could articulate it so well. So I truly recommend that book for understanding that. And there's many other ways to learn about your own intuition, but it's to learn more about yourself. So I hope that that's educational for people and helpful in your journey.
One more time. Thank you, Dr. Hunter. I thought my mic was supposed to be on, and it was, but it wasn't. Kind of blonde moment here. Anyway, great job. Dr. Hunter is an excellent spiritual counselor, one of the best I've met, and she offers a lot. She has an incredible ability to get down to the problem and come up with solutions. So thank you very much, and we will talk to you later. All right, without any further ado, let's get on to the next and final segment of our program. Tonight, I've got a mic up here for you, Grant. Grant Rubendunst is back. He's going to be, of course, Grant is a licensed mental health counselor with the state of Florida, and he's also an eclectic paranormal researcher, anomalous researcher into a number of different things. His presentation tonight, The Psychology of Hauntings. Grant Rubendunst.
Perfect.
You're on,
Okay.
wherever you want to put it.
All right. I'm wired for sound. Can everybody hear me? All right. To everybody out in the audience out there, hello and welcome. Okay. Mike, if we could have the first slide. Just one thing here before we start. I just want to let you know my background has been primarily academic, but everything that Dr. Kelly talked about tonight is based on psychological theory and psychological practice. Maslow and Erickson were two of the people that talked about self-actualizing people, which is in essence what this program is about. Okay, and it's always really tough to follow Dr. Hunter. My regards to you, Dr. Hunter. Thank you. Okay, tonight I'm going to give you a real brief overview on the psychology of hauntings. This is just a little picture to start us off, and Mike, if you could give me another slide here. Okay. What we've discovered, basically, this is based on some of the research that Dr. Kelly and I did. And here are two of the key things about hauntings, okay? Number one is perception, all right? Perception defined means the way you think about or understand someone or something. Two is the ability to understand or notice something easily. And number three is the way you notice or understand something using one of your senses, okay? So we all know that all of us perceive things differently, okay? So perception has to be taken into account. For those of you who might be students, or for those of you that are just basically interested in how we go about conducting research, these are just a couple of little tips. Always be mindful of the person's perception, okay? We have slide number 2 there, or 3, whatever it is. Okay, most importantly, Doug and I, Dr. Kelly and I, have kicked this around for years now, but what we find that's one of the primary drivers is a person's belief, okay? A person's belief system can contribute enormously to situations that may or may not be haunted, okay? And if we define belief, a belief is a feeling of being sure that someone or something exists or that something is true, okay? We all have belief systems. Also, it could be a feeling that something is good, right, or valuable. A lot of us believe in the Constitution of the United States. A lot of us have religious beliefs that we cling to strongly. It's also a feeling of trust in the worth of the ability of somebody. So belief is a very important component of our everyday life, okay? Michael, if we could have another slide, please. What we found when we were doing hauntings, we did many hauntings, investigations. And there were several psychological factors that we really had to feel, that we felt we had to rule out in order to make a good assessment of the situation. This did not mean that we were ruling out a paranormal event or a paranormal occurrence. What it meant was we had to rule out all other factors before we came to that conclusion. All right? And some of the things that we found impacted the outcome of an investigation was we might go to somebody's house, they may be using alcohol, or they may be using drugs. All right? Okay? We both know that alcohol and drugs can cause people's perception to be distorted. All right? Several other investigations we went to, okay, where people swore up and down that their house was haunted. And during the course of the investigation, we determined that the person who was experiencing the haunting experience also had a psychiatric history. Okay? Now, what I want you to understand is because I'm pointing these things out, does not necessarily mean that that's the correct explanation. These things have to be taken into account and ruled out. We went to a house one time with an older gentleman who swore up and down that he saw children running around his house, heard people knocking on the doors, and there were a couple other things. He thought he heard somebody coming and going in rooms. And after we evaluated him and we talked to one of his family members, we came to the conclusion that the chances were that he was probably suffering from a form of dementia. Okay? Well, that doesn't mean we're experts. It just means that if those situations come up, we need to address it because that's a logical explanation for a paranormal event or possible. The other thing to keep in mind too is stress. Stress can do strange things to people. It can cause them to actually have hallucinations at times. Okay? Or even psychotic breakdowns. It's been known to happen. Right? Hysterical blindness. And last of all, the great monster of all psychological distressing things, guilt. Just like Dr. Kelly talked about. If I could have the next slide, Michael. Okay, some observations here. Investigations conducted by Paranexus never conclusively found hard evidence for actual hauntings. We found very intriguing incidents with our psychics that we employed as part of our investigative team. Many, many interesting stuff that didn't fit patterns, okay? So, although we never found anything that was conclusive and as far as rock-hard evidence, there was a lot of blurred edges, okay? After many hauntings investigations, we have concluded that the phenomenon has two primary driving components, and those are individual perception and belief systems. Now, Michael, if we could just flash forward again to the next slide. When you're doing an investigation or you're considering aspects around a potential haunting situation, do a preliminary investigation. Start with your own observations or of the individual and the family and their environment. Rule out, like we talked about a few minutes ago, any alcohol, substance abuse. Rule out any underlying psychological disorders, and you'll be able to figure this out. You don't have to have a PhD to determine if somebody's not talking sense or their behavior is a little bit bizarre. Respect the individual and the family's beliefs. And above everything else, embrace do no harm. Okay? Now, if I could, I believe it's the last slide, Michael. Conclusions. Okay. Take into account that some individuals or family members in hauntings, and this is really important, may possess some level of psychic ability. Okay? This was one of the things that we thought was very interesting. Many times we would come to a home and it was one person. And although we couldn't say that we could find anything hard facts, we also kind of felt that possibly that person, a younger person, might have been intuitive. So if you're an investigator, if you're a student, if you're just interested in the phenomena, take into consideration that these people may have a gift. They may perceive things differently than all the rest of us. Evaluate the environment and the variables. Say, for instance, if they're located underneath high power wires, well, we all know the effect of high power. Okay? It can cause fields, and it can cause people to act in bizarre ways. There was a very famous haunting where that actually occurred, where people were under the bombardment of high power. They were underneath the big high power lines. Always respect your client's feelings regardless of your investigation results. Dr. Kelly and I concluded many haunting investigations to tell the person that we couldn't find anything substantial, and yet they would swear at the end of the time their house was haunted. So rather than confront them and say no, it was not our place to do that. Our place was to respect them. And that all fits into our whole program, okay? So these are just some things to keep in mind. And is there any more slides there? Just one? We finished with Casper the Friendly Ghost. So basically that's it in a nutshell. I appreciate your attention, your kind attention, and I guess I'll be doing more of these as time goes on. So if you have, and that includes folks out in the chat room or wherever, students, if you have any questions, any suggestions, I'm open to do whatever I can to provide you with areas that you might be interested in. And once again, thank you very much for allowing me to come up here and yammer on for a little bit. Oh, yeah, I got to take that off, don't I? There you are. Thank you, sir.
Grant, thank you very much. Excellent as always. We've had a lot of experiences with that kind of thing, and the psychology is a huge aspect of what we teach in paranormal science and parapsychology in our degree program. All right, good. We're doing good with time. Okay, so let's talk about a few announcements here, just a couple of things. As I had mentioned last week, I would like to do a Skywatch stargazing party. Is it really a party? Is that really the right term? But basically, yeah, she's going, yeah. But next week will be mostly a new moon after the Tuesday program, and it's fairly dark out here. They don't have a lot of the street lights on back behind us, and so, you know, we'll aim for that. I'm also trying to get an astronomy club to come out sometime and set up some telescopes and look at that kind of thing, and I think that would be interesting. And I'll bring my telescope, and they can, you know, some of those kids can teach me how to use it. All right, so that will be for our social hour next week if you'd like to come and look at the sky. I also, a couple of other things to keep in mind, this is primarily for the local audience here, is one of the things I want to do with this church is to find ways to pay it forward in some way for the community in some way. If you have ideas, I would like to hear them at your leisure. You can email me, you can tell me, whatever, if you have any ideas. A lot of our stuff is about paying it forward. So as and this applies to everybody listening, as we go from day to day, and we live day to day, look for opportunities to step it up a notch. A lot of folks are in the habit of paying it forward, doing good, finding a nice to do here and there. We call that doing a do right. You're doing the right thing. As I mentioned last week, do no harm is a big part of it, but we also have to do right. So I'd like to encourage everybody listening to step it up a notch over this coming week, to look for opportunities to do the right thing, to help somebody else who needs it. You know, keep it healthy. Don't do things for other people they could and should do for themselves, or if doing it for them would enable a bad or an unhealthy behavior, we don't want to do that because that's just codependence. But by and large, see if we can't give somebody a helping hand. Next week, I would like to open it up to the audience. If you have an experience of doing right, I'd love to hear it, and you know, we can use that as an encouragement. We can use that not as a time to boast or to one-up one another, but as a time to, hey, we're doing some good around here. And so those are some things that I had in mind for that. I also like to thank those here locally for your nice donations for last week. It helps pay the bills around here. Appreciate that. Last thing on the agenda before we conclude is a quick soul light meditation. And this is designed to get us thinking, to kind of sear it in. It's not time to go to sleep yet. That comes later, right? But if you would be so kind, and this applies to the broadcast audience as well, find yourself in a comfortable position. This will only be 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5 if I get long-winded. And it's just a time to relax a little bit. So as you sit there looking straight ahead. You can close your eyes or keep them open, and if you keep them open, focus on a point straight ahead of you and just breathe. I want you to take in a deep breath all the way in through your nose. Hold on to it to the mental count of 3, and then just release it and relax. I want you to take notice of your body, your shoulders, your neck. How are they right now? Are they relaxed? Take another deep breath in through your nose. Hold on to it to the mental count of 3. And just relax. It's all right. You're safe. This is your time. Nobody wants anything. Nobody calling. Nobody asking. This is for you. Just breathe. Now in your mind's eye, I want you to visualize this ball of light, glowing light right above your head. That is your soul light. That is your higher self. It represents that. That is there, and I want you to see this ball of light, and it's connected to everything out in the universe. See all those tentacles of electricity spreading out and connecting with all people, with all things, all living things. This ball of light is your strength. It's who you are, and it can revitalize you. And I want you to imagine bringing this ball of light, your soul light, right on down to your chest area, right into the middle of your body. Just bring it on down, straight on down, and see it in your chest, your mid-region. Now I want you to imagine that light just filling you up, just like a glass, pouring liquid into a glass, filling you right up from head to toe with its healing, nurturing, relaxing properties. Feel it revitalizing you, and understand one thing right here, right now, that that energy that is you can encourage you, can soothe you, can calm you, can heal you. See it directed to whatever area of your body, your life, your soul that needs to go, it needs to go to. See that light addressing an area. Perhaps you have an ache or a pain or an area that needs to heal. Direct that energy, your energy, and focus it on that area and see it. Visualize it revitalizing that area and relieving that pain or that situation. And just hold that for a second while you breathe deep and relax. And while you're there with your powerful energy, your powerful soul light, I want you to see it begin to slowly rise back up to its normal position right above you, always guarding you, always there for you. And I want you to direct some of that abundant power that you have out into the world to those who need it. And we'd like to send positive energy, not only to this world to help it heal, but to perhaps a friend, an acquaintance, a family member who needs some energy, some healing, some encouragement. And as you send that on out, understand that you are powerful, that you can walk with your head high because you are perfect just the way you are and getting better every day. You are a perfect work in progress. We learn from the mistakes we make, and we do right and do no harm. Now, I'm going to count to 3. I want you to come back and just begin to open your eyes. 1, feeling so good, so relaxed, so positive too, feeling just like you've been, the water of a beautiful waterfall flowing over you and relaxing you and making you feel so good. And 3, eyes open, coming back. That's the power of your soul light. You have everything you need within you to accomplish anything you want in life. Until next week, I encourage you to listen, think, learn, grow, and live. Please stay around for a little bit for our coffee klatch, have some coffee and some soft drinks. I appreciate you coming tonight, and I appreciate those in the broadcast audience being with us tonight too. Hope to see you all next week. Good night. We don't want to get up.